I stood in the freezing parking lot of the Riverside Animal Shelter, my hand gripping a leash that felt like a lead weight. Behind me, Sadie, the dog I had spent 3 months fighting to adopt, was anchored to the concrete. She wasn't growling. She wasn't barking. She was sitting perfectly still, letting out a sound so primal and hollow it felt like it was tearing through the cold January air. I had done everything right. I had passed the background checks, prepared my home, and spent weeks earning her trust through the iron bars of a kennel. But now that the gate was open, now that freedom was finally hers, she refused to take a single step toward my car. Her amber eyes were locked on the shelter's heavy glass doors with a desperate, heartbreaking intensity. I pulled gently on the leash. Nothing. I called her name, my voice cracking. She didn't even blink. It was as if her soul was still trapped inside that brick building, and no matter how much love I offered, she wasn't going anywhere without it. In that moment, I realized I hadn't just adopted a dog. I had walked into a mystery I wasn't prepared to solve. I had 2 choices: drag her away from the only thing she seemed to love, or go back inside and discover the secret the shelter staff hadn't told me. Little did I know what stayed behind those doors would either be the making of my new life or the final straw that broke my already fragile heart. 6 months ago, the silence in my house became a physical presence. My dog, Booster, a golden retriever who had been my shadow for 15 years, died on the kitchen floor while I was at a corporate meeting. I knew he was sick, and I knew the end was close, but I chose work over him. I chose a deadline over a final goodbye. I found him at 6 p.m. cold and alone, and the guilt from that moment became a ghost that followed me into every room. I lived in a mausoleum of regret. Booster's bed stayed in the corner, his collar sat on my nightstand. My sister told me I needed to move on, but I wasn't looking for a replacement. I was looking for a way to forgive myself. That was when I saw Sadie on the Riverside Shelter website. She was a grey and white pit bull mix, with eyes that looked like they had seen the same darkness I felt. The adoption process was grueling, 3 months of interviews and home visits. I visited her twice a week, sitting outside her cage, reading books aloud, just so she'd get used to my voice. She was gentle but guarded, always looking over her shoulder toward the back of her kennel. I thought it was just shelter stress. I thought once she tasted the air of my backyard, she'd forget the smells of bleach and despair. But as I stood in that parking lot, watching her tremble not from the cold, but from an impossible choice, I realized I knew nothing about her at all. She was teaching me a lesson in loyalty that I had failed to learn with Booster. She wouldn't leave a soul behind, even if it meant staying in a cage forever. Chapter 1. The Secret in Cage. 12. I dropped the leash, not in anger, but in surrender. Sadie didn't bolt for the woods or the street. She simply stayed where she was, her gaze unwavering from the shelter doors. I walked back toward the entrance, my boots crunching on the thin layer of ice. When I pushed through the glass doors, the familiar scent of industrial cleaner and nervous energy hit me like a physical wall. Avery, the shelter manager who had guided me through the last 3 months, looked up from her desk. Her smile faltered the second she saw my empty hands. "Drew, what happened? Is Sadie okay?" "She won't move," I said, my breath coming in ragged bursts. "Avery, she's sitting in the middle of the lot crying. She's not scared of me. She's waiting for something, or someone. You told me she was ready. You told me everything." Avery's shoulders dropped. She looked at the ringing phone on her desk and ignored it. She signaled for me to follow her into the back, past the rows of barking dogs and the clanging of metal bowls. We stopped in front of cage 12, Sadie's home for the last half year. It was empty now, save for a frayed blanket and a chipped water bowl, but as I looked closer, I noticed a movement in the very back corner, hidden in the shadows of the concrete ledge. A pair of massive, bat-like ears poked up, then 2 bulging, terrified eyes. It was a chihuahua, so small he looked like a handful of spilled cream against the grey floor. He was shivering so violently that his tiny claws clicked against the pavement. "That's Taco," Avery whispered. "He's about 5 pounds of pure trauma. He was dumped on a doorstep in a cardboard box, covered in cigarette burns and old fractures. He doesn't trust humans. He doesn't even trust the sun." I watched as the little dog crawled toward the spot where Sadie used to sleep, let out a tiny, high-pitched whimper, and tucked his head into his paws. My heart did a slow, painful somersault. They came in together, Avery continued, her voice heavy with guilt. Their previous owner was an elderly woman who died. Sadie practically raised him in that house. Here in the shelter, she became his shield. She stands over him when he eats, so the big dogs don't scare him. She cleans his ears. She's the only reason he's still eating, Drew. We tried to tell people, but nobody wants a package deal. And they want the beautiful pit bull, not the broken, unsocialized chihuahua that might never let you touch him. You were going to let me take her and leave him here alone? I asked, the realization stinging. We have to give the dogs a chance at a home, she defended, though her eyes were glassy. If we insist on bonded pairs, sometimes they both end up dying in a cage. I hoped she would adjust. But looking at her out there, and looking at him now, I was wrong. I looked at Taco. He was a fragment of a dog, a living ghost of someone else's cruelty. Then I thought of Sadie in the parking lot, choosing a cold concrete floor with her friend over a memory foam bed in my warm house. She wasn't being stubborn. She was being a hero. I stood there staring at Taco, and all the perfect plans I'd made for the last 3 months began to crumble. I had calculated my budget for one dog. I had bought one high-quality harness, one set of ceramic bowls, and one orthopedic bed. My apartment lease explicitly said, one pet. My life was organized into a neat, manageable box, and this tiny, shivering creature didn't fit in it. He's not adoptable, Drew, Avery said softly, sensing my internal struggle. Not in the traditional sense. He needs dental surgery, specialized socialization, and a level of patience most people don't have. That family in the lobby earlier, they wanted a purse dog. They took one look at Taco's record and walked away. If you take Sadie, we'll keep trying, but she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I walked back outside to the parking lot. Sadie hadn't moved an inch. When she saw me approaching, she didn't wag her tail. She just looked at me with a profound, soul-piercing sadness, as if she were saying, "How could you ask me to forget him?" I knelt in the snow next to her. "I get it now, Sadie," I whispered. I thought about Booster again. I thought about how I had left him alone because it was easier for my schedule. I was about to do the same thing to Taco. I was about to be the reason another dog died waiting for a person who never showed up. I pulled out my phone and called my landlord, Mr. Patterson. He was a gruff man who valued rules above all else. 2 dogs, Drew? That wasn't the deal. His voice crackled over the line. I know, sir, but one is 6 pounds. He's smaller than a toaster. And if I don't take him, the other one won't leave. They're a team, please. I'll pay a double deposit. I'll cover any scratch, any sound. I just can't leave him behind. There was a long, agonizing silence. Fine, he grunted. But if I hear one yip, they're both out. I hung up, my heart racing. I looked at my bank app. The savings I'd set aside for a new start would be wiped out by Taco's medical needs within a month. It was an impulsive, reckless, and financially drainful decision. It was the least me thing I had ever done, and it was the first time in 6 months that the weight on my chest felt lighter. I walked back into the shelter, grabbed the extra leash from the counter, and looked at Avery. Get the carrier. We're taking them both. Before we get to the final part of this journey, I just wanted to stop and say thank you for being here with me. Telling this story feels like opening a window into the soul, doesn't it? We've all had those moments where we had to choose between what's easy and what's right, and it's so much better when we don't have to walk that path alone. If this story is touching a chord in you today, or if you've ever been the one who stayed for someone else, please consider subscribing and joining our little family here. It's not just about a number. It's about knowing there are people out there who still believe in kindness and loyalty. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had a pet or a person teach you a lesson you weren't ready to learn? Let's talk down there. Your stories make this space feel like home. The transition wasn't like the movies. There was no slow motion running through a field of flowers. When Avery brought Taco out in a small plastic carrier, Sadie finally stood up. Her entire body transformed. The mournful howling stopped instantly, replaced by a frantic, whining joy. She pressed her nose against the grate of the carrier, her tail whipping so hard It made a thumping sound against my legs. Taco, however, was still a statue of terror, huddled at the very back of the plastic box. Loading them into the car was a delicate dance. I placed Taco's carrier on the back seat and opened the door for Sadie. She jumped in but didn't look at the window or the road ahead. She immediately pressed her side against the carrier, guarding the little life inside it. As I drove away from the shelter, the silence in the car was heavy with the realization of what I had just done. I was no longer a man with a dog. I was the guardian of a fragile, broken ecosystem. When we arrived at the house, the real work began. I carried Taco inside first, still in his box, and set him in the middle of the living room. Sadie followed, her paws clicking on the hardwood floors I had polished just for her. I opened the carrier door and stepped back. Taco didn't come out for 4 hours. Sadie didn't leave his side for a second. I sat on the kitchen floor, far enough away to give them space but close enough to watch. I saw Sadie reach her large grey head into the carrier and gently lick the top of Taco's trembling ears. She was coaxing him, whispering in a language of scent and touch that it was okay, that the man who had brought them here wasn't like the ones from before. Around 8:01 p.m., a tiny, cream-colored nose poked out, then a paw. Taco stepped onto the rug, his legs shaking like dry leaves in the wind. He looked around the vastness of my living room, his eyes wide and bulging. He saw the bed I had bought for Sadie and immediately tried to hide under it. But Sadie had other plans. She walked over to the oversized orthopedic bed, lay down with a heavy sigh, and left exactly enough room on the corner for a 6-pound shadow. Slowly, painfully slowly, Taco crawled over and tucked himself into the crook of her neck. For the first time since I'd met her, Sadie's eyes closed in peace. She wasn't looking for the door anymore. She wasn't mourning. She was home, because he was home. I realized then that I hadn't saved them. Not really. Sadie had saved Taco years ago, and today they had both saved me from the person I was becoming, a man too afraid of loss to take a chance on love. The impossible math of the finances and the landlord didn't matter anymore. As I watched them sleep, two souls woven together by survival, the ghost of Booster finally felt at rest. I had finally chosen right. It has been 3 months since that freezing afternoon in the shelter parking lot, and my house is no longer a mausoleum. It is a chaotic, living thing. Taco still flinches if I move too fast, and he may never be the kind of dog that runs to the door to greet me with a wagging tail. But every morning, I wake up to a specific sight. Sadie sprawled across the foot of my bed, and Taco, a tiny, cream-colored speck tucked safely under her chin. The financial strain I feared is real. Taco's dental surgery was expensive, and my savings are thin, but the return on that investment is immeasurable. I've learned that love isn't something you can calculate or plan for. You can't put it in a spreadsheet or wait for the perfect time, because love is often messy, inconvenient, and wrapped in a package you didn't ask for. I look at the empty space on my nightstand where Booster's collar used to sit. I finally moved it into a memory box. I realized that keeping his things out wasn't honoring him. It was just me clinging to my own guilt. Sadie and Taco taught me that the best way to honor a dog you lost is to give your heart to the ones who are still here, especially the ones nobody else wants. If you ever find yourself standing at a crossroads, torn between the path that is safe and the path that is right, remember Sadie. Remember the dog who refused her freedom until her friend could walk beside her. Sometimes, the thing that seems like a burden is actually the very thing that will set you free. My house is full, my heart is heavy with responsibility, and for the first time in years I am exactly where I am supposed to be. We didn't just survive the winter, we started a new season together, and as it turns out, the package deal was the best bargain I ever made. I truly hope you enjoyed this journey as much as I enjoyed telling it. It's a reminder that we are all just looking for a place where we don't have to be brave alone. I have one last favor to ask. If this story stayed with you, could you share it with one person who might need a little hope today? Let's spread the idea that loyalty still matters. I'll see you in the next story. Until then, take care of each other and the ones who have no voice.